Hello everyone, my name is John Bussard. I'm an HPE Business Transformation Center engineer for Ingram Micro. I help support HPE servers, blade systems, storage, as well as Aruba networking technology solutions. In my videos, what I like to do is show you a slide from a popular PowerPoint and then demonstrate to you what that means within a management context. Today we're going to be looking at HPE's Aruba Fabric Composer, or what some people call AFC. So Fabric Composer allows us to simply automate deployment as well as configuration across our series of network switches within our environment. Right. It also enhances our visibility into interconnectivity between these solutions, right? Especially when we look at the third-party integrations. And today I'm going to show you some with VMware and Nutanix, as well as ILO Amplifier Pack. So with all that being said, let's explore this management context. All right, here we are in the dashboard. Right, and certainly we get a great amount of information here. We could certainly configure that if we wanted to. We can see our switches, our fabric inventory. We certainly have our integration over here with Nutanix, and you can see that's not connected right now, but we're going to correct that as we kind of go through this configuration. But any alarms, any events, and things like that will show as soon as you log in. And again, this is highly customizable. Right, and just give you a quick tour in this environment. We could see different configuration options that exist over here. Right. Maintenance, right? It's things that I like. Switch checkpoints, so you can certainly take checkpoints of switches at any point in time. You can also schedule these checkpoints, and I think that's kind of nice because we've all probably run into the time where we forgot to do a write mem. Right, so that'll help us there. There's also the ability to back up Aruba Fabric Composer as well. So there's a lot of things you can do inside this interface. If we go to visualization and then networks, right, we can see the switches, and we can also take a look at the interconnectivity. So we could see peer switches. We could see leaf and spine, which we don't have configured yet. We can also maybe go to VXLAN. So we're going to come back, obviously, and look at that, and we're going to see that configuration has been created. Now, before I go any further, what I think I'm going to do is show you a whiteboard. I normally don't like to show whiteboards, but I think it helps with what we're dealing with today. So I have this diagram created. Now, what I will tell you that is VLAN 188 only exists on this switch. I can also tell you that VLAN 189 only exists on this switch. But VLAN 80 exists on both of these switches. I will also tell you that VLAN 80 over here doesn't have an IP address on it yet. Right? And this switch doesn't have a default gateway at this time. Right now, these links are unconfigured between switches. And again, we're going to do a layer 3 spine and leaf style configuration. So even though VLAN 80 exists on both of these switches, we're going to have to use some protocol to traverse that across the network, something like VXLAN. Over here is our Nutanix environment. Right, so obviously that's why we're not getting connectivity. And something else you should know is each one of these systems down here is pinging the other three. Right? Obviously they're unsuccessful at this time, but each one of these systems are pinging the other three. Another thing to note about these systems here is they are, and this isn't too important, but they are virtual machines, and that's just so I can get visibility into the Windows interface remotely. But these links are dedicated to the host, so they got dedicated network adapters for each one of these hosts in this environment. The last thing I will say is like I mentioned, VLAN 80 doesn't have an IP address, and there's no default route that's over here. So we're going to build up this configuration. I'm going to show you how to do that using Aruba Fabric Composer. So if I minimize this, this is our switches themselves. So again, we can see their interconnectivity, and that will make a little bit more sense as to what we're looking at. We could also look under visualization at hosts. And it's the host configuration. So the VMware environment is a single ESX host with vCenter on it, and we can see that interconnectivity. So this is the host. These are the switches over here. Right. And if I look just over here, we can see the virtual machines. We can see the port group they're connected to, the vSwitch, as well as the NIC. All right, and like I had mentioned, some of these systems have a direct connection to a NIC. So for example, if we look at this one, we could see it's directly connected to this port group, this vSwitch, and then out through this network adapter. So let's look at these hosts real quick. I do have them listed above up here. Now one thing to note, and I'll select the first host, is we could see that this host is pinging the other 3 hosts right now, and obviously it's unsuccessful. We can get a good understanding of what system we're looking at up here. So we could see the operating system, we could see the switch it's connected to, the port on the switch it's connected to, as well as the VLAN. So I thought that would help us go through this configuration if we could see that. And again, we can look at this one. This one's connected to the 6300 on VLAN 189. This one's on the 8325 on VLAN 80. And this one's on the 6300 on VLAN 80. Now, none of these at this time have internet access. Right, and I can go through all of these. Right. And you'll see that there's no internet access for any of these. All right, so let's configure this network. So if I go over here, right, I can certainly go to the configuration editor, right, and I can get a visibility. And I'll pop over here and we'll take a look at this. We'll look at the configuration on the switches. You can edit in here if you wanted to. I wouldn't recommend it. You certainly can. Obviously, this tool is to allow you to not live inside a CLI style interface to be able to configure your environment. Right, again, the configurations we'll do will be consistent across, all these switches that we're working with up here. Right. Let's go over to guided setup. All right, so I've done some of this. This is going to be a little bit longer of a video, so I've already moved us down a little ways through this configuration. It's nothing too crazy. For example, I discovered the switches themselves. I created a fabric, so that's just a fabric you can assign switches to, so you have a single entity to be able to manage. I've done the NTP configuration as well as the DNS configuration. The idea behind this guided setup is, for example, if I click NTP, it'll bring me up a wizard, right? And it'll take me through each of these things that I can answer in order to be able to configure this. And if I cancel this, we can see that set up down there. You can see I got a Google Time server. And if I wanted to edit this or get a view into what the configuration options are, I can go edit here, right? And we can go through each one of these if we wanted to. All right, so I'm using Google Time server. And then again, DNS. Right, again, I can click on that and go through the configuration options for that. Again, I've got these 2 DNS servers that are running over here. All right, and if we go look inside our configuration, we'll see the Google Time server here. Right. And here, and then if I scroll down past the interfaces, right, we can get there. There we go. You'll see I have the DNS set on the management VRF. All right, and then we could look at all these other switches and see that configuration as well. Before I go into the rest of this configuration, I want to talk about one other thing, and that would be network resources. So again, if I go over here to network and then resource pools, right, you'll see I have MAC address resource pools as well as IP address resource pools. And I know these are smaller. It's just meant for 3 switch configuration that we're doing today. Obviously, these will be for much larger environments, right? But I'm going to be selecting these resource pools as a part of our configuration. All right, so let's work our way on down. I don't have any stack switches, but you could certainly set up the stacking with the VSX configuration. But we're going to start at layer 3 leaf spine configuration. So let me select that. We're going to automatically generate the layer 3 leaf spine pairs. So it's going to look at all the switches that we have, and then it's going to make that decision. So I'm going to call this our layer 3 leaf spine. I'm going to click next. All right, and here's those resource pools I was just showing you. So we're going to select that resource pool. I'm going to click next again, and then apply. And then we can go over to configurations, go to routing and VRF, and there's our default VRF. And I can look at IP interfaces, and we can see the IP interfaces that were created. We can also see that at a pre-existing IP address on 188, as well as 189, and we can see the switches that they're dedicated to as well. All right. I can also use this context to add an IP address to VLAN 80 on the 6300 switch. So I'll go to Actions and click Add. All right. I could select VLAN 80. I could select the switch, put in the subnet, and it'll put in the IP address. And we'll click Next. That looks fine. And then we'll apply. So now at this point, I would imagine that everything over here is going to be able to start to ping each other because routing is enabled and we have IP addresses on these two VLANs. So let's go take a look. So we'll go to 6300. There we go. We can see the reply that's happening. Here's the other 6300, but we look at the switch on the 8325. We can see nothing's happening over here. Right now, on these two switches, we still can't get out the internet. All right, so let's go correct that. Let's put a default route. If you look over here, you can see I have static routes. I'm going to click on that. Go over to Actions. I'm going to click Add. Destination prefix, so we're going to go 0.0.0.0/0, and then the route type, we're going to do a forwarding, and the next hop address is 192.168.80.1, and everything else looks fine. We're just going to put it on the 6300 switch. Click Next, and then Next again. There's our summation. I'm going to click Apply. So at this point, I would imagine everything on the 6300 switches could get out to the internet. All right, so if we open this up and we do a refresh, you can see that it's now answering. And we can look over here as well. Refresh here. Again, we can get out of the internet. All right, but again, switches that are on the 8325 switch, excuse me, the hosts that are on the 8325 switch cannot get out yet. Alright, so we got our IP addresses set up on our switches. Let's move forward. Let's do an underlay. We're going to set up some routing so our IP addresses can communicate within our environment. So I'm going to do an underlay network. So we'll call this our underlay. I'm going to click Next. I'm going to use OSPF. That makes sense, right? I'm going to select our address pool again. So we're going to do underlay. Transit VLAN. I'm going to do 185. All right, everything looks fine. I'm going to click Next again. This looks fine as well. All right, and I'm going to click Apply. All right, and it's created that OSPF relationship. Now, nothing's pinging yet because we haven't told OSPF what we want to populate. But we can go over to the configuration editor and we could see some things that have happened on our behalf. So again, if I scroll down, and we're on the 6300 switch right now, but if I scroll down, we will see a little bit further. There's our spine and leaf configuration. There's the OSPF configuration. If I go further, again, we'll see the OSPF configuration. And we can go across all these switches and see that it exists across all of them. But right now, we're still nobody's pinging, anybody beyond what's pinging on the 6300. So we kind of want to start propagating those routes. So let's go over to configuration. I'm going to go to routing. I'm going to go to OSPF. Then I'm going to select default and then go under actions and then edit. And we can see what this is configured for us. Right, but I want to look at redistribute routes, and I want to select the connected routes as well as the static routes, and then click apply. So at this point, if I go back to my diagram, I would imagine everything here can ping. I'll also imagine that this system will be able to ping everybody as well, but this system that's on VLAN 80 on this 8325 won't be able to communicate yet. So let's go take a look. All right, so certainly, if we highlight this up here, we could certainly see who's pinging who. All right, let's give you an understanding of what's happening. All right, so we'd imagine the 8325 VLAN 80 is not hitting anybody. But over here, you know, 188 and 189 we can start to hit those guys. So we've got the layer 3 configuration going, but we have to extend this VLAN 80 across. So let's go through that process. I'll show you how that works. All right, so we did the underlay. Let's start with an overlay. So we'll call this our overlay. I'm going to click next. We're going to use iBGP. I'm going to click next again. Our reflector will be our 10K. That's our spine switch. Click next again. Of course, we need a resource pool. So now I'm going to do an overlay. Use that resource pool. This looks fine to me. Click next and then apply. So now we have the overlay set up. In a little bit, that'll turn green. And now we're going to do the EVPN configuration. So I'm going to click next again. We're going to do it across the entire fabric, all the switches. Click next. I'm going to give a prefix, so we'll call this our EVPN. I'm going to click next again. Put VLANs. Now you'd want to put all your VLANs in here that you want to traverse the network, the layer 3 environment. We're just pushing VLAN 80 again because we're just trying to show you something works. Obviously you need a layer 2 VNI, so I'll just use 1001. Click next again. We need a MAC resource pool. I'll select that. Route type, we're going to select auto. Click next again and then apply. Right, and then again, we can see that relationship exists. Right, so at this point, everybody should be ping everybody, and everybody should be able to get out to the internet. So if I go up top here, it's not happening yet. It will. I go here. There it goes. She's starting to ping. We could probably go back over here. See those pings are starting to happen. All right. So everybody can ping everybody. Right, and everybody gets out to the internet. So obviously that guy was getting out to the internet. This guy's getting out to the internet. This guy's getting out. As well as this guy. So we interconnected our entire environment and everybody can get out to the internet. If I go over into Aruba Fabric Composer, I can go over to visualization and I can look at networks. And now if I go over to connections, again, we already had these peer switch relationships that already exist because we just run a cable between the two switches. But if we go down to leaf spine, we can see that relationship that exists. Right, we can also do the VXLAN tunnel. Make sure I select VXLAN. Okay. If we go and look inside the configuration editor, you can see what the solution has done on our behalf. So we could see the EVPN here, the virtual MAC. And if we go down further, kind of zoom past these interfaces. And again, we can see the spine and leaf configuration as well as some of the OSPF. Right, we go down a little bit further. We can see the VXLAN. And then we can see the OSPF configuration as well as the PGP configuration. Right, all the way down to here. Same thing's true on the 8325. Again, here's the EVPN. Down a little bit further, and past the interfaces. There's the spinal leaf configuration with OSPF. Okay. And then we could see the VLAN configuration here. We can also see the loop acts are created. Right, and again, here's the OSPF configuration here. And then we could look at the 10K series switch. We could see some of the same information, maybe a little bit different. If we go down, there is a spinal leaf configuration to the 6300. Right. Oh, we passed one. There's the one going to the 8325. And then down below again, we can see the OSP configuration as well as the PGP configuration here. Right. Now think about if we had to type in all those commands ourselves. Certainly that would be complex, would take us a lot longer. Obviously I stopped to show you different things, but we could have did this very quickly within this environment in a consistent fashion. So that's the value of Aruba Fabric Composer, is the ability to be able to do that as well as get visibility into the environment. So again, if we go back to our dashboard, I know this Nutanix is showing up as not configured, but in a moment or two, there we go, it's showing up as configured, so then we're going to get more detailed information within that environment as well. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and please stay tuned for more videos.